Willow Creek, quaint, quiet, unsettling, a place where time seemed to stand still and the air was thick with an unspoken history. The town was draped in an eerie silence, the kind that felt heavy, almost suffocating. The streets, often empty, echoed with the memories of footsteps long gone. A thick fog perpetually rolled in from the mountains, shrouding everything in an ethereal mist. It was as if the town was hiding, cloaked in secrecy from the rest of the world. It was the kind of town where secrets whispered on the wind, where shadows danced in the flickering gaslight, casting eerie shapes that seemed to move with a life of their own, and where every creak of a floorboard sent shivers down your spine. The houses, old and worn, seemed to groan under the weight of their own stories. John had just moved in, escaping the chaos of city life for the supposed peace of the countryside. He was seeking solace, a place to start anew, away from the relentless pace of urban living. He'd bought an old Victorian house perched atop a hill overlooking the town. The house, with its grand yet decaying facade, seemed to beckon him with a promise of tranquility. Harbinger Lane, they called the street. An ominous name, perhaps, but John didn't believe in omens. To him it was just a name, a relic of the past. He'd learn soon enough. The moment he stepped inside the house, a chill ran down his spine. It wasn't just the cold draft, it was a feeling, an awareness of something unseen. The rooms were cold and draughty, filled with an unsettling quiet. As he walked through the house, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. The walls seemed to watch him, the shadows seemed to follow him. He found an old dusty photograph on the mantelpiece, its edges frayed and yellowed with age. The faces in the photograph seemed to stare back at him, their eyes filled with secrets. As he looked out of the window at the foggy town below, he couldn't help but wonder about the lives that had been lived in this house, the stories that had unfolded within its walls. The ticking of an old clock echoed through the silent room, a constant reminder of the passage of time. Each tick seemed to grow louder, more insistent, as if urging him to uncover the mysteries of Willow Creek. He found an old journal, its pages filled with handwritten notes and sketches. As he read through the entries, he began to piece together the history of the house, the town, and the people who had once called it home. The candle flickered in the dark, casting long shadows on the walls. The more he read, the more he felt a connection to the past, a sense of belonging to the enigmatic town of Willow Creek. With each passing day, John's curiosity grew. He was determined to uncover the secrets of Willow Creek, to understand the whispers on the wind and the shadows in the gaslight. Little did he know the town had its own plans for him. The house was a labyrinth of dark hallways and even darker rooms. Each corridor seemed to stretch endlessly, twisting and turning in ways that defied logic. The walls, covered in peeling wallpaper, whispered secrets of a bygone era, and the air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. Dust-covered furniture loomed in the shadows, remnants of a forgotten life. The once grand armchairs and ornate tables now stood as silent sentinels of the past, their surfaces blanketed in a thick layer of dust. It was as if time had stood still in these rooms, preserving the memories of those who had once called this place home. John spent the first few days unpacking, each creak and groan of the old house amplifying his unease. The floorboards, worn and weathered, seemed to protest under his weight, and the walls echoed with the sounds of his movements. Every box he opened revealed more relics of the past, adding to the sense of history that permeated the house. Strange things began to happen. Objects would move on their own. A book that had been left on the table would be found on the floor, and picture frames would tilt at odd angles. It was as if the house itself was alive, playing tricks on its new inhabitant. Doors would slam shut without reason. Whispers seemed to emanate from the walls, too faint to decipher, yet too clear to ignore. The voices were a constant presence, a low murmur that filled the silence of the house. John would often find himself straining to hear, trying to make out the words, but they always eluded him. One night, lying in bed, John could have sworn he saw a figure standing in the doorway. The room was bathed in darkness, and the figure was little more than a shadow, but it was there, watching him. He blinked, and it was gone, leaving him to wonder if it had been real or just a trick of the light. A tall, gaunt silhouette shrouded in darkness. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving John with a heart pounding against his ribs. The image of the figure lingered in his mind, a haunting presence that refused to be forgotten. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that the house was hiding something from him. He tried to rationalize it, to blame it on his imagination, but deep down a seed of fear had been planted. He told himself that it was just the stress of moving, that the house was old and creaky, but the unease persisted. Every shadow seemed to hide a secret, and every sound was a reminder that he was not alone. Sleep offered no escape, only a recurring nightmare of being trapped within the house, unable to escape the presence that haunted its halls. In his dreams, the walls would close in around him, and the whispers would grow louder until they were a deafening roar. He would wake up in a cold sweat, his heart racing, and the sense of dread would linger long after the dream had ended. Days turned into weeks, and the strange occurrences intensified. John found himself constantly looking over his shoulder, his senses on high alert. He tried to learn more about the history of the house, but the townsfolk were tight-lipped. When he mentioned the name Harbinger Lane, their faces would cloud with a mixture of fear and pity. Some houses, the old librarian had mumbled, her voice barely a whisper, hold on to their past. Some things are best left undisturbed, but John couldn't ignore the growing sense of dread that permeated his every thought. One evening he heard a blood-curdling scream coming from upstairs. He froze, his blood turning to ice. He grabbed the antique poker from beside the fireplace, his heart pounding in his chest. Slowly, he made his way up the creaking stairs, each step echoing in the oppressive silence. Section 4. The Attic Door. The very mention of it sent shivers down John's spine. He had always felt an inexplicable dread whenever he thought about that part of the house. The scream seemed to have come from the attic, a room John hadn't yet dared to explore. It was a place shrouded in mystery and fear, a place where the unknown lurked in every shadow. The door was slightly ajar, and a cold draught seeped out, carrying the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic. It was as if the very air was warning him to stay away, yet he felt an irresistible pull to uncover the secrets hidden within. John pushed the door open, his hand trembling. The creak of the hinges echoed through the silent house, amplifying his fear. He hesitated for a moment, his mind racing with thoughts of what could be waiting for him on the other side. The attic was pitch black, the only light filtering in from the moon hanging low in the sky. The pale beams of moonlight cast eerie shadows that danced across the room, making it seem alive with unseen presences. He took a hesitant step inside, the floorboards groaning ominously beneath his weight. Each step felt like a journey into the unknown, the creaks and groans of the old wood adding to the sense of foreboding that gripped him. A sudden gust of wind slammed the door shut behind him, plunging him into darkness. The sound was deafening, and for a moment John felt completely isolated, cut off from the world he knew. John fumbled for the light switch, his heart racing. His fingers brushed against the cold, dusty wall as he searched frantically, the darkness pressing in on him from all sides. The bulb flickered to life, casting long, distorted shadows across the dusty furniture and forgotten toys scattered across the floor. The room was filled with relics of the past, each item telling a story of a time long gone. And then he saw it. His breath caught in his throat as his eyes locked onto the far corner of the room. In the far corner, scrawled across the wall in what appeared to be dried blood, was a message, "Get out." The words seemed to pulse with a life of their own, a chilling warning that sent a wave of terror through John's entire being. He knew then that the attic held more than just old memories. It held a dark secret that was better left undisturbed. Section 5. A presence in the dark. John stood frozen, his breath catching in his throat. The message, the blood, the oppressive atmosphere, it was all too much. He had to get out of there. As he turned to leave, he felt a cold breath on the back of his neck. He spun around, his heart pounding against his ribs. Standing in the doorway, bathed in the pale moonlight, was a figure. A woman, her long black hair cascaded down her back, obscuring her face. She wore a white gown, stained crimson. Her eyes, when they met John's, were filled with an unspeakable sadness and rage. John stumbled back, his voice caught in his throat. He wanted to scream, to run, but his legs wouldn't obey. He was paralyzed with fear.
Thank you for listening to today's story. If you want to challenge your nerves further, subscribe to the channel to continue discovering other horror mysteries.